Hey guys, it's Cassie, aka the Peculiar Poet, and welcome to Topic Tuesday, Black History Month. So, for this Black History Month, we'll be talking about Carter G. Woodson. Now, Carter G. Woodson was the second African American to graduate with a PhD in history from Harvard University. He felt that Black history was too small in the whole of academia. He felt that it was his role to use Black history and Black culture as a weapon against racial injustice. So in 1916, he had moved to DC and formed the Association for Negro Life. And the goal of this association was to expose Black history to a wider audience. He had hoped that the public would share his enthusiasm for history, but unfortunately, this was not the case, and he grew very impatient. But out of this impatience, he created Negro History Week in February of 1926 with the ultimate goal of exposing school-aged children to Black history. Now, this was the second week in February. Yes, second week in February. And I want to also emphasize that during this time, he wasn't the only one. This wasn't sort of like a singular thing that was happening at the time. It wasn't in some sort of bubble. At the time, there was an African American renaissance happening, through music, writing, art. You had people writing about the Black experience, what it meant to be Blackness, and the injustices, the trials, the tribulations, the joys. You had, musicians like Louis Armstrong creating their own genre of music and singing about similar things. You had artists painting African Americans for the first time in a positive light. You had thousands of Southern Black Americans migrating to Chicago, and Woodson thought that the Negro History Week would capitalize on this creativity and stimulate more interest in Black history. Now, with this Negro History Week, Woodson had two main goals. One, he hopes that through the history of Black Americans, he could prove to white Americans that because African Americans had made such equal contributions to the founding of America, modern America, I'm sorry to all natives, to say America, I mean from when the Pilgrims arrived. Anyways, he hoped that by proving that they had made equal contributions, it would ultimately lead to them being treated as equal citizens. He hoped that if he had proved their worth, that they would be found worthy. Now, his second goal was to have more outlets talking about and printing a newspaper about, Black life, like Blackness, what it meant to be Black, just the Black experience as a whole, because at the time, no outlets were doing so, and the ones that were would almost exclusively do it in a negative light. And he understood the importance of showing African Americans in a positive light, and ultimately he thought that Negro History Week, which became, as we know it today, Black History Month in 1976, he believed that it would ultimately be the vehicle to achieve these things. Now, Black History Month, as we view it today, is a little bit different. We are no longer looking for anyone's approval or, anyone to tell us our own worth. We know that we are worthy. We know that we deserve to be treated equally. We don't need to prove again our worth to anyone through our contributions. And although many of those contributions that we've made throughout history have been erased, again, because only one group of people were controlling the narrative, and at the time they didn't, view us as worthy enough to receive, to receive the credit for all that we have done. They choose to ignore the fact that if it wasn't for slavery, America would not have succeeded. Its entire economy was dependent on slavery. Despite all those things, despite many people knowing those things, it didn't change the way they viewed African Americans, because it went much deeper than that. It went down, it all boiled down to what they saw on the outside, and that can't be changed by simply telling somebody. Sorry about the glitch. As I was saying, unfortunately, those people's minds were not going to be changed by hearing the accomplishments and stories of African Americans throughout history. No, unfortunately, it was up to the victims themselves. It was up to the African American community themselves to be the catalysts for change. It was up to them to fight for their own rights. And yes, some of the stories of their personal experiences and the injustices that they were experiencing did help. Uh, it helped push for more allies. And I will not discredit all those who supported the African American community, all the allies that they had, but you can't be an ally to a movement that doesn't exist. Black History Month, it encompasses so much, and it means something different, I think, to every Black American, every African American. But for me personally, it serves as a memorial. We look at the Holocaust and we hear how important it is for those who have been through the concentration camps, for their children, for their grandchildren. They talk about how important it is to amplify their voices. You can hear the pain and trauma that's been passed down through generation. And when we look at so much of the anti-Semitism happening in the world today, specifically in parts of Europe, and more specifically parts of Europe where that were more greatly affected by anti-Semitism, you can just still see the correlation between the Holocaust and the heightened levels of anti-Semitism in those areas. Now, when we talk about Black history, when we talk about African Americans, this wasn't something that happened for 5 years or 10 years. This is something that happened in America for hundreds of years. And we still have people today, unfortunately, unable to see the correlation between slavery, between, the injustices in civil rights. And by the way, the Civil Rights Act was only enacted in 1964, and so many still fail to see the correlation between these injustices and systemic racism. These injustices and the modern day racism that we are facing right now, it yes may have transformed a little bit, but it is still very much apparent, and we have far too many Americans that are still denying so much of what we are experiencing. And if you need to use the Holocaust as a correlation or comparison, do so for yourself so you can understand, so you can empathize. And for me, that's what I think so much of Black history is about. It's about amplifying the voices of so many of those hidden figures that we aren't taught about in the American education system, unfortunately. For all of those who've gone through it, we know far too well. It's important to amplify the stories, amplify that history and what African Americans have been through, not just, their contributions. And I think that all of this together serves, again, as a memorial to show respect for the ancestors and to just show admiration for the African American community as a whole, to show its strength. And, I'm sure I can speak for the majority of us when I say February isn't the only time we celebrate Black history. February isn't the only time where there's Black history. Every month is Black History Month, but because it has been neglected so much, we use this specific time to bring it to the forefront, to let everyone else know that Black history exists, that our voices will not be erased. Happy Tuesday and happy Black History Month.